Welcome to Joy in the Breakthrough, a podcast where we'll be talking to a wide range of leaders from different generations and backgrounds who have found power in being broken open. I'm Connie Lindsey.
And I'm Anna Valencia. We are your hosts, and we believe that our challenges can lead to breakthroughs, and we want to share those insights with you.
We hope these stories will inspire you to explore the I'm possible in you.
And we are so excited to welcome Dr. Raby to join the Breakthrough. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a pure honor.
I'm so excited to hear about your story and what you're going to share with us. And I know Connie has been with you for a while. And so I'm going to give her the honor of introducing you and kick off this conversation.
Thank you.
Well, I welcome you with all the joy and love and deep respect.
It's so reciprocal.
From the top of my heart. We are honored to have you. So I'm going to tell everybody a little bit about you because we really want to make sure that we have all the time to hear from you. Dr. Raby, as we said in the original intro, is an educator, mentor, and a visionary for integrative medical practices. Her journey as an integrative physician began in childhood. She was born and raised in Albuquerque, New Mexico, and was inspired at an early age by an innate curiosity and encultured training in herbal remedy, prayer, and holistic healing as practiced by the First Nations of Mexico and the southwestern United States. She received her training in allopathic medicine at the University of New Mexico, where her studies in cross-cultural medicine introduced her to the ways of medicine men, shamans, and curanderas, or healers. Drawn to caring for the whole person, she excelled in her internal medicine residency at Rush Presbyterian St. Luke's Medical Center in Chicago, serving 1 year as chief resident. And finally, I just want to add this because this has been my lived experience with you as a healthcare change agent. Dr. Raby continually elevates awareness and understanding the efficacy of integrative medicine. So as my teacher, friend, and healer, welcome again.
Well, thank you so much.
So we here at Joy in the Breakthrough, we want to give our listeners just kind of a way to see, like through storytelling and conversations, ways to find joy and ways to take care of yourself. So tell us really kind of how you got to be Dr. Raby and what influence in your life or your upbringing had on you and where you are now.
Yeah, thank you so much. It's so much. I mean, and it's so reflective. As mentioned, I was born and raised in New Mexico. That in itself, being an ancestor of the First Nations and of Mexican descent, played a huge role. But I also have to top that with a huge flair and influence by the southern part of the country. So my father was born and raised in Fayetteville, Tennessee. And so I have this very cross-cultural sensitivity that I was reared with. I was reared, with, so much of the southern part of my father's culture and my mother's Mexican culture, but lived in New Mexico. Interesting enough, I always tell people that if it weren't for tuberculosis, I wouldn't be here today. Because my father came to New Mexico with his parents who actually had TB, and they were quarantined in New Mexico. And so that's how my father even got to New Mexico.
Wow.
So if it weren't for tuberculosis, I wouldn't be here today.
Well, thank you, TB, I guess.
Thank you, TV, I guess. So in any event, so it was just really that beautiful flair of being tapped into both those cultures that really played a huge role in where I am today. But I was, things weren't always the greatest, and I was reared primarily. I was the middle child of 6 children, primarily reared by a single parent, my mother, and in the 60s. So if you take, middle child, single parent, 60s, throw that into a chatbot.
Yes.
Everybody get there. So that can be pretty crazy. So I think just pulling in all that trauma and drama through my rearing really tend to bring forth my self-realization and all that I'd learned to. It came back down to really just ultimate love. But it took me a long while to really walk through that and through all the darkness. But in the darkness is beautiful light.
Yes.
The deeper the trenches, the more my medicine. And the more that I gained from that really just flourished who I was as a person, who I am as a person. And I just took all that and I just said, oh God, what were the gifts? The gifts were so much. It was even down to my uncle who played such a huge role in my life, who was an amazing artist and a gardener. My grandmother, who was the herbalist and the curandera. So I grew up with herbs in my baby bottle. I grew up with, little sayings that it was always about healing ourselves. There was a little saying called, it's interesting because my daughter just reminded me on my text just like literally 2 days ago. It says, sana, sana, colita de rana, si no sana, sanarás mañana. So it's like, little frog, heal me now. heal me. If you don't heal me today, heal me tomorrow. So anytime we fell or hurt ourselves, you're by yourself, you don't scream and you immediately, you sit down and you rub that wound and you say that saying. Wow. And so I taught my children that, how to self-heal. About heal me, little frog, heal me. If you don't heal me today, heal me tomorrow. And so it was always about that. How can I take care of me instead of depending on outside sources to do that for you? Yes. So it really comes down from little things that I didn't realize that I was being formed into this person who is a caregiver, who is a teacher, who is a listener. And it's all about that, and people say, oh, you're a healer. I don't find myself as a healer. I'm a vessel where all these sources move through me, and it's communicated through me, spirit guides and all the lessons that have come through from ancestors and whatnot. So that's, I think, a huge part of that. I mean, cooking is really important. Gardening, nature, being one with family units was really, really important to us, and that was all. I mean, Christmas trees. We didn't go down and cut Christmas trees. We went to the mountains and we took out the whole root of a Christmas tree, and the whole root and the tree came into our home. It was decorated, and then it was taken outside. And we actually we had like 15 different Christmas trees that were like 15 feet tall by the time I left my childhood home.
Wow! You replanted them back into the earth. That's beautiful.
So you're receiving and you're taking, but you're also not stealing from Mother Earth, and so there was all these little lessons that as I think about it. There was interesting another little story when we would walk. I would walk home. It was like 45 minutes from school when I was younger. And there was it was a weed. Literally, it grew in sidewalks. And it was a certain time of the year it grew, but I knew that weed in my life, that was my dinner. And so I'd walk home from school and I would pull these weeds from the sidewalks and I'd carry them all the way home. And it's something called verdolaga. And little did I realize until our naturopathic doctor at my office told me this was, 50 years later, told me the name of that weed. It's called purslane. And purslane is one of the most food-dense, vitamin-dense, omega-3 fatty acid-dense weed herb that you can actually, and that's what we would make. It was just with garlic and onion, salt, and pepper, and bacon.
Yes, she said the B word.
The B word. And so it was those things. But there was also just so many beautiful things that I pulled from. But there was also a lot of trauma. All that trauma, whether it was alcoholism, drugs, sexual, emotional abuse, all that came with that in my rearing as well. So that part was tough too, but and it also all that really tested my spiritual essence and my Catholic uprearing. But through that, I just felt like there was so much that I was delving, questioning, even at a very young age. I would go to mass and I just would cry. But I loved, because I really felt I was there by myself, and there was always this messaging coming through. And I just knew that as I grew older, it was really about me understanding, knowing that I am the light.
Oh, yes.
I am the vessel. And through all that, I realized that I am the server. I am there to serve. And through all that push came to shove. Push came to shove. Before you knew it, I was in medical school. And all that was all that, Western medicine trained influence, along with realizing my rearing and what I gained from that and pulling it together. When I went through medical school and residency and internship and chief residency, I was like, there's something missing. There's something really missing. And that's when I left my residency and went to Northwestern, and I said, I want to do this. Wow. That was 30 years ago.
And you were just out of residency.
Right out of residency.
And it was brand new. And how long had you been practicing or been at the hospital before you said, I want to do this?
4 years.
Wow.
So medical school residency, 4 years, and I walked into a very high, I've always taught in an academic institution. I've always participated in a tertiary care academic institution, always. And so they looked at me, and I wasn't just kind of the cream of the crop. I don't want to toot my horn here, but you're a chief resident, so you walk into an institution like they're like, ooh, what is she speaking? What is she saying? But they listened. They listened.
Well, you made them listen.
Yeah,
too.
I made them listen. But I think also it was that I and God granted, I knew that in my soul and intuitively I needed to do this. But I got to tell you, I didn't know what the heck I was doing.
That's why they call it practicing.
Yeah, it's a practice because I knew that what I was doing wasn't complete. There was gaps. There was things that we weren't tending to.
Hi, I'm Channing Leonard, guest hosting for Darius Hillman. Joining me on the next edition of In the Arena, photographer and art collector Patrick McCoy.
So most people think, you went all the way to the ends of the earth to get all this artwork, like 1,400 pieces in my house. But the important thing is that 90% of it I got from Chicago.
Join the conversation Tuesday at 7 p.m. on CAN-TV Cable Channel 19 and streaming on cantv.org and the CAN-TV Plus app. Experience the power of community television.
For our listeners, could you also tell them what integrative medicine is? Because when I say I go to an integrative medicine practice, people go, oh, alternative medicine.
Yes.
It's like, no, she's not telling me to run around a tree 3 times and say some incantation.
Yeah, right.
She does real medicine, and if I need
Yeah.
something. First, tell our listeners what that is, and
Yes.
then we'll come back to
Yes. So the term was probably evolved 30 some years ago, and it was Andrew Weil. I'm sure a lot of people know Andrew Weil. He's the first one to actually bring that terminology to the forefront. And so it came out the front of Time magazine. It was like, oh my God, what is this? Like, oh, here it is. So really, what does that mean? But by the time he came out with that, and I started practicing integrative medicine, as I knew the terminology before it came out Time magazine. But what it was is, I'm a board certified licensed internal medicine physician. I absolutely love what I do in internal medicine. I mean, it's the masterminding, the really intense training that we have, which is different than a family practice doctor. So a lot of our training is in intensive care units, cardiac care units, in hospital care, emergency rooms. I was attending physician in emergency rooms. So it's just critical care. And so you learn very in-depth detail, the natural history of treating chronic disease and dis-ease. And but as I went through that amazing training, I still love because I like that mastermind of trying to figure things out. And you're like the Sherlock Holmes. But it's also knowing that when I got out of residency, it's like, wow, there's a gap. There's so much more than just focusing on, okay, you take this drug. I mean, a lot of it is just it's medicine that's not very deep. And so there was a gap. And so I, delved in and said, okay, this is integrative medicine. How am I going to go through this? There wasn't formal training. And so it was just, there was a few of us that were pioneering this and getting this through. And so it was some struggle getting, I was at a tertiary care academic institution trying to get this across to the masses, to the physicians, to, and it was also, residents. And so it was a lot of training fellows and whatnot and trying to work through that too. And at the same time, understanding what does it mean? And so there was so much that I've learned. What it meant, 30 years ago and what it means today is very different. It is so evolved. But it's delving into the whole person, looking at a whole system, looking at your psychosocial, emotional well-being, looking at your sleep, looking at your nutrients, looking at, environmentally, where were you raised? How's that impacted your genes, your genetic makeup? How that expression, it's all about epigenetics. That expression of your environment can shift and change your genes. It can actually solicit a positive outcome, or it can create disease or disease. But we know that, your sleep, your diet, your environment, your stressors play such a huge role
Stressors.
in our health,
number one thing.
our health and
That's the
well-being.
pivot.
Yes.
And people don't realize that stress is real. Stress causes cancer. Stress causes autoimmunity. Stress causes depression, pain, insomnia. And all that shifts and changes your mitochondria. The mitochondria is the energy source of the powerhouse of every single cell in our body, but it speaks enormously. And so just really knowing that you put all these systems together and you tap into each one of them. And then on top of that, it's really not just looking at the Western process, but you have other dimensions of caregiving that partake in the process. Like I have an acupuncturist, Michelle Goebel-Angel, who's fabulous. And Kathy Chavez is our naturopathic doctor who really, the whole naturopathic medicine is something people think when you talk about naturopath, they think, I always ask people, do you understand what that is? And so, oh yeah, somebody who does things naturally. It's like, well, no, it's actually a formal training. There's only 5 of these institutions, medical schools across the nation. They go through very in-depth training, and they're brilliant. So I have naturopathic doctors. I have physical therapists. We do IV vitamins. We have an apothecary. I have gynecologists. I have nurse practitioners. We have internal medicine doctors. We all practice integrative. We all have this mindset.
And you go to one place for all of that care.
Yes.
Pick me, teacher, pick me.
Which is really
Through
important.
the timeline of life. So I've known Dr. Raby for, I think, almost 30 years.
Yeah,
it
is.
is. Because when John was first diagnosed with multiple myeloma, and then my mom got sick, and then I had a big job, and I'd go to Dr. Raby and say, I have a headache, or, oh, I'm not sleeping. And she wouldn't say, well, here's something you can take for a migraine, or this is the type of migraine you're having.
Yes.
It's the whole person. And she took enough time to ask the questions. And I trusted her enough to say, well, here's really all the things. Here's what's scaring me right now. Here's what I'm doing, and all of that. But I didn't have to go anywhere else.
It was
right?
just, and you know,
It's
as
amazing.
women, we are so busy in our lives.
Yeah.
You know, we are caregivers for our parents, for our children, and especially, you know, as our leadership roles continue to grow and those responsibilities, having a one-stop shop. And then all of you being able to share that information
That's
about
part of the integration.
what we have instead of having to go, okay, you need a referral here and then a referral there and then you got to go there.
And getting an appointment.
And getting an
And like
appointment.
when I go in for my acupuncture.
And sharing that information.
Right.
For
Dr.
Jessica.
Raby's walking through, but also the gynecologist or whomever else. And so there is this connectedness. And, you know, we talk about connections and relationship. There is that, it's a community. It's a community. And Dr. Raby, tell us about some of the classes that you do.
Oh, yes. And so one of the things that it's so hard to, because I'm only one person, you know, and so, you know, there's only so many people we can see a day. And there's also, what we've really tried to do is really expand our horizons. So by tapping into the population out there via, you know, what everybody else is doing, we're doing today is really just tapping in. So we actually have Zoom classes where we can, and it's really catapulted during COVID because everybody was at home. And so we have classes that are like right now we're doing one called Impeccable Self-Care Class. It's a 6-week course that just taps into everything. We're circling around our health and well-being and just really deeply understanding how important it is to impeccably being honest and authentic with our health and our well-being, down to your sleep, down to your stresses. What am I eating? You know, what plastics am I exposed to? What's in my lotion? What's in my makeup? What's in my, you know, water? You know, what environment am I in? And just really sleep. I mean, there's so much circling around
Use
just
of
sleep.
essential oils.
Oh, tons of essential oils. You know, and teaching. You know, we have an essential oils class. We have a brain health class coming up. And I always tell everybody, if you have a brain, you need to be in this class.
Yes. And I think that's so important because I think as we go through the busyness of life, we don't take the time to ask our questions about how we're caring for ourselves.
Right.
I know I've gone through lots of red flags and really had a tough year last year, burnout, and it manifested later, like 6 months later, I kept getting strep throat 5 times in like 4 months, I think it was. And I finally had a tonsillectomy, but all that inflammation in your body. And so Connie said, I've done acupuncture for 20 years. Try it. And I tell you what, acupuncture has reduced my stress level.
Right. That's awesome.
And I would have never thought about that being something positive to do because sometimes as a tired mom of a 3-year-old, we talk about getting home and opening a bottle of wine, right? Or, you know, going into the not so much positive ways to handle our stress and all the things that life's bringing at you, and especially kind of happening in the world right now of chaos. Tell our listeners, you know, I know you talked about acupuncture, but what is a lot of ways to take care of ourselves? What are some of how do you even get started in this kind of world?
You know, I think also it's really, one of the things I always talk out of the box is really your sleep. I mean, it is so critical. You know, our circadian rhythms, we really need to honor. I mean, I always tell the animals know what to do. We as human beings really mess it up. You know, it really, you know, why does the sun go down? We should be, you know, asleep. You know, we should be waking up with the sun. You should be waking up and, you know, when you look in the sun, and like they do, they look in the sun. When you look in the sun, that sun actually decreases the amount of melatonin secreted from your pineal gland in your brain. So when you look in there, it affects that. So, you know, just being in a line with that and knowing that what are the things that affect my sleep? You know, looking at your TV, looking at your computer, looking at your phone, all those, that blue light also suppresses the amount of melatonin trying to secrete from your pineal gland. But even caffeine intake, people don't realize, you know, when you drink coffee, it's my, Connie knows I'm always talking about coffee.
And you know, that's like when you're talking to moms out there, that is like our one hot coffee in the morning when it's quiet. That's like our go-to.
But I always tell people what's really important is honoring the ritual and honoring ceremony. I have ceremony, as I did this morning. Every morning it's about my ceremony. So to be here with you today, to be with my 20 patients a day, to running a business, all that takes me caring for myself. Ceremony is really, really important. And ceremony, but you know, so I drink green tea. I'm a big green tea person.
I do love green tea, but after I had my baby, it was just not doing the trick. And so every once in a while, but I have limited it down back again to 3 days, 3 days a week as a treat, because I also have gastro issues, and so that flares it up. But I think to your point, having that hot cup of tea, or maybe it's just that time.
So it's the ceremony, and I always tell people being conscientious of the contents of your cup. So So
Gotta tweet that. Conscientious
So
of the
the contents of your cup, because yes, that ceremony is there, and I never want to take ceremony and ritual away. It's but what's the biochemistry, what's happening inside that cup that's affecting your physiology, and that's what I love teaching patients. I mean, I can sit here and just talk about coffee alone, and I'll talk 15 minutes just about coffee alone when people come into my office and what it's doing down to relaxing the lower esophageal sphincter in your esophagus and relaxing that and hence the reflux. That's just the biochemistry of what's happening.
Does it matter whether it's decaffeinated or caffeinated?
Well, decaffeinated coffee still has caffeine in it. Yeah,
Just not
she
as
won't
many.
She won't let me get away with it.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then a lot of decaf coffee in this country is decaffeinated with chemicals. So that if it's not water pressed, then you're getting that. So it's just all these details. I mean, it's so, and then it inhibits ADH, which coffee does, which is antidiuretic hormone, a hormone that lives in your kidneys. So 90% of our body from our neck down is made up of water. Water, it's everything's about water. It's the essence of our existence. Our brain alone is like 70 to 80% water. So when you're drinking coffee and alcohol does the same thing. It inhibits that hormone. You diurese and you wash out all your water-soluble minerals and vitamins that are important in so many biochemical pathways in your body. And I can go on forever about that.
Oh, I'm feeling bad about that dirty martini last night and the coffee this morning.
Drink the water. Dr. Raby, though, you did mention something, and I don't want us to be apart without you sharing this. You are a business owner.
Yes.
You're a physician. You're a mom. Yeah. You're a friend to so many of us, and you're so authentic and present for us. How do you take care of you? You mentioned, what's in our cup. How do you do all
And
those
you are a woman of color,
Yes.
charging the way in a male-dominated field for so many years. And when you told me that I just went in, and I had only been there for 4 years, and I came in and said, this is what's missing, this is what I want to do, that confidence to do that in that field, I want to hear too about that.
It was a journey. I mean, it's like, I just felt like, when I walked into this, I knew that it was a very male-dominant, and it still is, influence. And so I just, I had to grow. I had to understand how that I was enough. That I am enough, and that I had the same training. I could speak the same language. I can teach them. I can teach them something that they don't know that I know. And even circling around functional integrative medicine and all the research behind it, but even cross-culturally.
Yes.
There was so much about me, standing up as a woman, in front of, I remember I had one administrator who's no longer there. He was so lovely. And he would tell me, I would do these dog and pony shows throughout the different divisions at the hospital. And some of it was naivete because I didn't realize that I shouldn't be, marching into these sessions with these head of departments and residents. And I was just so impassioned about what I was doing and how it would help them bring down their negative outcomes in surgery, or how we can support people through cancer, or how we can help the women in the women's menopause and all the things, the women's health, all that definitely could play a role, just enhance their, and just enlarge their satchel. What else can you bring into this? And so I would go to these dog and pony shows and I would just do my spiel and they'd let me do it. It was so beautiful. And I remember one of the administrators told me, Theri, we don't really let doctors do this. It's like, it's heavily, run by administration. And so it was very enlightening for them too. And it was really sweet that he shared that with me. But it was, it was done in a very gentle, kind, communicative way. It wasn't abrasive. It was, it came from.
Did you have mentors and sponsors as you thought about, throughout your career? Like you said, that person who kind of supported you by saying, we don't really do this, but clearly didn't try to torpedo you.
Yes, and I think that, at the time, I think it was the gentleman who brought me in from Northwestern, which was a big, faux pas, to going from one institution that was at odds with the Rush to Northwestern was a huge step. But they brought me in with open arms, and they heard my story. They knew that this is what I wanted. They didn't quite understand, but they were supportive. And they wanted to learn. I mean, I think that was a huge gift too, is that they were, internal medicine physicians who, it was a very small group that eventually it was a independent physician association that gradually grew underneath the umbrella of the hospital. And so, but they allowed me to carry through and continue to explore what this meant. I mean, I was learning it too, and so I think just little things that I did. I did some significant work at Harvard. They had one of the initial integrative programs, and it was interesting because it was called complementary medicine back then. So when you talk about integrative medicine, how that terminology has evolved. I mean, complementary medicine it's a federal government term. So it was what the federal government was using. They still kind of use that term. NIH uses, complementary medicine. And then you also heard the word alternative. So, and that was thrown around. Sometimes that's thrown around as well. But alternative is really doesn't involve, it had anything to do with the Western process. That's what you do when you just take like Chinese medicine alone or Ayurvedic medicine alone. So that's not acknowledging and honoring
or integrating
the Western process.
Yes.
And so, and then, as I said, 30 years ago, the word integrative came about. And then now it's integrative functional medicine that came about. So there's a whole, since then, it's all this IF Institute of Functional Medicine. So there's lots of internal medicine doctors, lots of physicians that are board certified from multiple disciplines that are now involved in the
What's so
functional
beautiful about it, I think, and I
programming.
know we're running out of time, we could do this all day,
Yes.
is owning my own health, right?
yes.
The whole notion of being, and I'll talk about this, being health, that notion of health and well-being. And say less, I'll say a little more about that.
Yes, and so I know we're wrapping up. I want to say one thing that you said to me that I just loved. When you said not enough, and when you were going through that, and people were telling you were enough, but even we had this conversation before this. It gives me, looking at someone like you, so prestigious, so where you are in your career, and you still kind of feel that way at times.
Sure.
It makes me feel, okay, I'm not alone in that. And even
all
if she
human.
has it all together and she's where she's at and she still feels that, it's okay that I still feel that way too, because I oftentimes don't feel like I'm enough. And so thank you for sharing and
you're
being
welcome.
vulnerable as a leader to say that to other women. I'm also Mexican descent.
Yes.
So to hear you say that just like filled my soul. So I wanted to give you that.
Oh, well, thank you. And also,
And that's why I'm so blessed to have had her in my life.
And where can we learn more about you for our listeners, and then we'll get into Say Less.
Yes, well, my office is actually in downtown Chicago at 500 North Michigan Avenue on the 21st floor, and it's the Raby Institute for Integrative Medicine at Northwestern. And
do you have a website?
the website is www.rabyinstitute.com, and phone number is 312-276-1212.
Oh, she's giving you it all. So before we go, we'll definitely, listeners, please follow Dr. Raby. She's got some great material for you, and we'll definitely have to have you back on because we
I
could
would
go
love
into
it.
so much more. But we're going to wrap up with the end with Say Less with Connie.
We've been talking a lot about health and wellness today with the incredible Dr. Raby. And I read a quote somewhere that said, being healthy is a state of body, but being well is a state of being. And so I encourage all of us, based on what we've heard today, is to move into that state of being, that when our body is doing well, we're functioning, but well-being can truly lead us to joy.
Thank you so much for another episode of Joy in the Breakthrough, and we'll see you on the rest of season 2. Thanks. Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank you so
everybody.
much.
Bye.
Thanks.